DJI Mini 2 or DJI Mavic Air 2? That is the question. Hey, if you don't know me, my name's Jake, and I create content here on YouTube to help solo creators on the go. People like me who are on the go, creating small commercial projects or stuff for here on YouTube. So I test and review equipment here in Alaska, and I do tips and tutorials on how to use that equipment so you can tell better stories and make smart buying decisions when you go to buy a new piece of gear. Today we're talking about the Mavic Air 2 and the DJI Mini 2, both two great, fantastic small travel drones, but with a little bit of difference between the two. One will likely serve your needs and maybe your budget a little better than the other. So yeah, we're up here in Hatcher's Pass and we're testing out both of these drones. I will say it's about 10 degrees and the wind is blowing a little bit, so it's really cold. We'll see how long I last out here. To start off with, both of these drones are great travel drones, but they do have a little bit of difference in price. So where you can buy the Mini 2 for about $450 or $600 if you get the Fly More package, the Mavic Air 2 is going to cost you $800 or $1,000 if you buy the Fly More package. I generally buy the Fly More package just because it is nice to have all those extra batteries and the little extra case and stuff that they give you. But beyond that, they're both very good travel drones. You can see here that the Mavic Air 2 is actually quite a bit larger than the Mini 2. The Mini 2, I think, is probably the ideal travel drone if you're going to be traveling to a lot of different places and you don't want to take up a lot of extra space in your bag. However, there are a few caveats to that. One is the Mavic Air 2 offers tracking, so it will track you as you run through places like this here in Alaska. And it also has obstacle avoidance, so it will avoid most obstacles that it's moving forward toward. It doesn't have upward or sideways obstacle avoidance like the Mavic Pro 2 does, but it does have some obstacle avoidance and APAS, which is DJI's system for kind of finding a flight path through some obstacles. The Mini 2 does not have tracking in the same way. You can't track somebody as you walk. You can't track yourself as you're walking through. So if you're going to get shots of yourself walking through a space, you have to do it 100% manually yourself. It's not terrible, especially if there's not a lot of obstacles around, but because it doesn't have any obstacle avoidance at all, it is 100% dependent on you to make sure you don't run into something. Now, all that being said, you can still get some great shots with the Mini 2. They both offer some similar quick shot features like droney, circle, helix, and rocket. The Mavic Air 2 has a couple more like boomerang and asteroid. I don't use the quick shots that often. The ones I use the most are droney and circle just because I like those the most, but most everything else I do manually anyway. The interesting thing is both of these drones, in order to change from 1080p on any of the quick shots, you have to get the drone in the air, go into quick shot mode, then go into the menu, in the camera menu, and then you can change to 4K on both of these. Once you change it once, it stays at 4K, but that's the only way to change it to 4K, which is kind of weird. When it comes to the controller, they both basically use the same controller, but they are slightly different in some way because DJI had to release a firmware update so that the Mavic Mini 2 could be flown with the Air 2's remote controller, which doesn't really make sense to me because they basically look identical, but apparently there's some difference. I do hope that DJI releases an update to the Mini 2 to be able to use it with the smart controller, because the smart controller is by far my preferred way to fly my DJI drones. But as of the recording of this video, and I'll pin a comment below if that changes, there's no way to do it with the smart controller. Now we come to the footage. Both of these drones shoot 4K, 30 frames a second for the Mini 2, 60 frames a second for the Air 2. I don't use 60 frames a second that often. When I had the Air 2, I had to borrow this one from a friend because I sold mine. But if you do want 4K 60, you're going to definitely want to go with the Mavic Air 2, not the Mini 2. The other thing the Mavic Air 2 offers that the Mini 2 does not is HDR video. Now, I've kind of gone back and forth on HDR video. There are times where I've liked it and I found that it worked well, but then there's times where I didn't find that it worked that well. You can see the difference here between 4K HDR and 4K regular. Another big difference between the Air 2 and the Mini 2 is that when you're going to shoot in low light, the Air 2 is going to perform better because it has that larger half-inch sensor, whereas the Mini 2, having the 1/2 inch sensor, is not going to be able to handle low light as well as the Air 2 is. However, the Mini 2 does really well in low light when you want to shoot in low light. Both of these drones shoot 12 megapixel photos, and they're both really good photos actually coming out of either one of these drones. The Mavic Air 2 has the 48 megapixel mode because it has that quad Bayer sensor and it shoots RAW, which so does the Mini 2, but the 48 megapixel, the difference is it's just a little bit more detail. The difference isn't massive though as far as what you're going to see in the end, but there is a tiny bit of difference if you want to use the 48 48 megapixel mode, whereas the Mavic Mini 2 is limited to 12 megapixels. Absolutely fine for social media, for posting online, and it actually does pretty nice. And it shoots RAW, so you can edit it in Lightroom and give yourself a little extra space to push and pull stuff around. Another difference when it comes to the footage is the Mavic Air 2 shoots in a flat color profile, the Cine-like, whereas the Mavic Mini 2 does not. So if you want to do your own color grading, or if you want to match other cameras you're working with, the Mavic Air 2 is a little bit easier to work with in post than the Mini 2. And then we come to performance. How do both of these drones perform in wind? How do they perform in the cold? Because it is really cold out here right now, especially I've been out here for a couple hours. I'm starting to get pretty cold. The Mavic Mini 2 has been handling this okay. It has done fine. It's flown everything. It's flown in the wind, which is like about 10, maybe 12 miles an hour. And it's about 10 degrees. So the wind chill factor is actually pretty substantial right now. Obviously you can see I'm pretty well bundled up. But the Mavic Mini 2 has done okay, but it has given me warnings about the temperature being too cold. The battery temperature has been fine. I've been watching the battery temperature, but the drone temperature itself has been pretty cold, and it's been warning me that, you know, irregularities could occur. Whereas the Mavic Air 2 has handled this no problem. No warnings or anything like that. It's flown around just fine. And you can definitely tell that the Air 2 is a little bit easier or a little bit better equipped to handle more extreme conditions than the Mini 2 is. But like I said, the Mini 2 flew all around here, no problem today, easy. I always recommend keeping your batteries warm before you put them in the drone to launch, because that does help quite a bit. Another area of difference, especially when it comes to these two drones, is the top speed and how fast each of these drones will be able to respond or be able to move if you want to in sport mode, say. In sport mode with the Mini 2, the max I've been able to get is about 25 miles an hour, whereas with the Air 2, I've definitely hit 36 to 39 miles an hour in sport mode, which is a lot faster. So if you want to get someplace quickly to film something, the Mavic Air 2 definitely has the edge there. And that also comes down to wind resistance. The Mavic Air 2, because it's larger, it has bigger motors, and it just has more power. It can handle stronger wind than the Mini 2 can. But honestly, the Mini 2 has surprised me at how much wind it's been able to handle. Definitely way better than the Mini 1. I've flown it in 16 to 18 mile an hour winds, and it's held its own, which was surprising considering how small and lightweight it is. One more difference you need to consider between these two drones is the fact that the Mavic Mini 2 can be recharged via USB-C and via power delivery, which is fantastic if you're doing a lot of stuff like this where there is no power, or if you're traveling for long periods where you're not gonna have access to power. It's nice that you can take a battery bank with you, or even one of the solar powered USB batteries, and recharge your batteries on your drone. The Mavic Air 2, you definitely have to have a good power source, AC power, or a car that is running in order to recharge those batteries. So it's a little bit more difficult to recharge on the road or places like this where there is no power around. We'll do a noise check here. Okay, so right now the Mavic Air 2 is flying. Here's the Mavic Mini 2. Not the Mavic Mini 2, but the Mini 2. That's just the Mavic Mini 2 now, same distance exactly as the Mavic Air 2. One thing I'm really glad DJI has moved away from is Wi-Fi control of their drones. So thankfully, both the Mavic Air 2 and the Mini 2 work on OcuSync 2.0, which is a very stable system that gives you control for way further beyond your visual line of sight. Both of them give you great video downlink to the remote, but the Mavic Air 2 gives you a 1080p downlink to the remote, whereas the Mini 2 only gives you a 720p downlink to the remote. Not much to notice when you're just looking at a phone screen, but it is a little bit of a difference as far as the footage that gets saved to your phone that you might want to directly share to social media. So we come down to which one of these drones would be the right drone for you. Well, if you have the budget, and the budget isn't the option, you're okay with spending $1,000, you're okay with spending $600 for the Fly More combo for either one of these drones. Either one of these drones is going to get you great footage of you running around doing stuff. It'll take great photos. But if you're going to do more pro-level work, or if you're going to work in more extreme environments, you don't mind a little extra size, a little extra weight, then the Mavic Air 2 is definitely the stronger, more capable drone as far as operating in harsher conditions, heavier winds, and giving you a little bit better quality. But I was surprised at actually how close the quality between the footage of these two drones was. The Mini 2 is definitely the drone you want if you're gonna travel a lot. Not only is it under 240 or 250 grams, which is kind of the cutoff for most governing bodies to have to register your drone. To me, the Mavic Mini is the ideal travel drone because it is so small, so lightweight that you don't have to worry about it drawing a lot of attention. It's quieter, and it takes up almost no space in your bag. There are the trade-offs of not being able to track yourself all the time, but to me, that's worth it because of the size and just the ultimate portability, plus the fact that you don't have to worry about it getting in trouble with restrictions with most governing bodies. Now, if you want to see what I think about each one of these, a little bit more deep dive reviews of each one of these and comparisons to other drones like the Mavic Pro 2, the Skydio 2, then click or tap right there, put together a small playlist. I'll see you in one of those videos. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below or join my live stream Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern. We just have a short 1 mile walk to get back to the car through these very cold temperatures because it is freezing and I'm frozen. I will see you again soon in the next video. Cheers.